Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
This is your host, Alicia DeBrell from Insight Media. Today's guest is Brian Lomax. He helps athletes and teams become mentally tougher and achieve excellence. Brian coaches from experience. With his help, athletes and their teams become the ultimate competitors and ready for anything thrown their way. Brian is an expert at bringing the entire team to their peak performance. So, without further ado, I want to welcome Brian Lomax to the show. Hi, Brian. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alicia, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today.
This is going to be great. So let's jump right into it. Can you tell me just a little bit about yourself, your past, and your business experience?
Sure. In fact, what you referred to in the intro, helping athletes be mentally tougher, become better competitors. This is actually my second career. I actually used to be in computer science and, more specifically, software testing. So back in about 2010, I realized that was not a very fulfilling job for me. I wasn't connecting with that mission. But, since I had been in the corporate world, I had been still playing tennis competitively like I did when I was a kid and in college. And I got a lot of fulfillment out of that. And so in that process of staying a competitor and wanting to be better, even in my 30s and early 40s, I developed this program to help me become a better competitor. So I really started this kind of selfishly. But it forced me to ask the question of, how come I had to train myself on this by myself? Why wasn't anybody else out there really training athletes to be mentally tougher, but in a systemic way? And so that's when I decided to quit my job and start my business, Performance Extra, helping athletes to compete better. And so I've been doing that since 2010 and work with, a number of individual athletes across many sports. Most of them are probably tennis players, but work with athletes in diverse sports like luge, figure skating, equestrian sports, swimming, etc. And also work with a lot of college teams, especially now in the Division I realm, and again, across a variety of sports. So now I feel like I have the type of profession or even calling that is, giving me much more purpose and much more of a mission for my work.
I like it. So I would assume that the training and the way you coach people, regardless of the sport, teaching them to be mentally tough, it kind of goes to any sport, correct?
I think so. And I think actually, Alicia, it goes to any part of our life. If you think about life is really a performance context. And so many of the components of the training plan that I go through, the training program, come from positive psychology and sports psychology. And positive psychology, if people don't necessarily know what that is, they often associate it directly with positive thinking and being happy. But the real definition of that is positive psychology is a means of helping you live a more meaningful and fulfilling life. And how can that not help us in any context, right? And so a lot of sports psychology principles actually come from positive psychology. And so the two blended together can really help athletes in any sport, but actually anyone. You could even look at yourself, Alicia, as say like a corporate athlete, someone who's doing something like that.
I agree. You mentioned you do work with some players on their own, and you also work with teams as a whole. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And how does that work?
It's a little bit different. I mean, obviously, when you're working with individuals, you're going to get into very specific issues with them. There's a bit more of the counseling aspect of the training that goes with that. And, we probably do a little bit of a deeper goal setting process. With teams, it's a lot of the same content, but, I have to try to do more group type exercises, be more engaging for the team, get them talking to each other so that not only are they developing their competitive skills, but we can use this opportunity as a way of building some more team chemistry, more team cohesion. Not everybody on a team really loves each other. And, this is an opportunity to really increase that, because if you want your team to be high performing, you may not have to like everybody, but you do have to know how to work with that person and how to make sure that whatever we're doing is really for the collective good of the team.
I was just going to ask that, actually. I wanted to go a little bit deeper into that. So, like, what if you had a team who had a plus player on their team? I'm not sure the right terminology for it, but that number one, but he was a complete jerk.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying it politely. But let's just say he was a complete jerk and really cocky, and therefore it was causing the team not to perform at its best, and he was kind of holding the whole team where it was. What would you do in a situation like that?
I think we actually have to be very honest and transparent as a group that that's happening. And we have to actually talk to that player about why are they on this team? What's their purpose? How do they fit into, the whole, if you even look at a team like a machine, right? We are all like cogs in that machine. How do you fit into that? And by being selfish, by using your ego, perhaps a little too much, our team is not flowing. The machine is not working the way it can. And so, one of the early sessions that we do with teams is working on their motivation, their reason why. First at an individual level, why did you choose this sport? Why is it important to you to be excellent at this? And then at a bigger level, what are we all trying to achieve? What level of excellence do we want to reach? And then having us understand how we fit into that puzzle. And that's not to say that every sort of superstar isn't going to buy into that. But them operating on their own certainly won't help our team to achieve excellence. So it's really a process of, all right, understanding that actually, and there's a great book by this title by Ryan Holiday, your ego is your enemy, right? The ego is the enemy, especially when it comes to team sports. We have to put the ego aside for that collective good so that we can achieve things that, we couldn't have achieved just as a collection of individuals.
Yeah, that makes sense. So working with a team, how do you help them achieve better results?
Well, obviously results, we can't necessarily control that. Some of the teams I work with, they're in very difficult conferences. And so we're really trying to achieve better performances, at least the aspects that we can control and measure. Because we can get caught up in the wins and the losses. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're good or you're not good. It really depends on who your competition is. And again, we can't always control that aspect. So we try to really focus on the things that we can control, that we are bringing a lot of quality to the smallest part of our performance. So for example, I work with a Division I volleyball team. And really the smallest thing that we can bring excellence to that really matters there is a point. And so we discuss, okay, what's the process of playing a very quality point? And so they understand that. They know how to move from, one place on the floor to the next and, over the course of a point, and they know what to do in between points to actually create a great point on the next one. And that's all we can really do in terms of, better results is can we play more quality points? And then the leap of faith that you have to make is, all right, if we're bringing more excellence to that level and we play more quality points, it stands to reason we're going to win some more points. And once we start doing a better job of winning more points and stringing those together, then we can really start to see some excellent results. But it really begins with bringing excellence to the little things and then letting the little things accumulate into an overall great performance.
Okay, so then if you're working with a team, how does the coach get involved?
They're very involved, and I think they should be. I've actually had several coaches come up to me and talk about how they've actually grown as coaches as a result of our sessions and understanding, how athletes take in certain types of feedback, et cetera, and what they're working on so that they can actually promote these things in practice and monitor those. The reality to me, though, is that the coaching staff is part of the team. They just have a different job. They're not necessarily out there playing, but, their coaching is a huge part and huge contributor to our success. And I think sometimes we have to break that wall down between players and coaches. And our sessions are a great place to do that because they're learning just along with everybody else. And we just have to understand that their role is a little bit different. But, if we win a championship, the coaches are getting championship rings just like the players are, and they deserve it. And it's just that their role is a little bit different. The times where I've worked with some teams and the coaches have been less involved, it doesn't go nearly as well. So I love when the coaches do get involved because then I can have more productive conversations about what this team needs. What are you seeing, that we should be working on in our sessions? How can we really customize our program so that this team is getting exactly what it needs?
That makes sense. I want to talk to you about something which you call Mind It Gym.
Yes, the Mind Gym.
What is that?
Yeah, and I'm certainly not unique in creating that term. There's actually a good sort of starter mental toughness book called Mind Gym. But for me, I like to relate this back to, kind of like a strength and conditioning program. You go to like a gym, like a Planet Fitness or Gold's Gym, and we want to do the same for our minds. We want to treat the brain and the mind as if it were a muscle, because it is. And using the concept of what's called neuroplasticity, which basically means that our brains can change shape, right? They have this sort of plastic element to it that allows them to change shape. And if we think of our minds like muscles, well, wouldn't it be great to have a really toned, beautiful mind, something that looks fantastic? Now, we can't obviously see that, right? You can't open up your skull and see what a great mind you have, Alicia, but we know that we can do certain things to help add some discipline to that. So for the Mind Gym that I use with athletes, really there are 5 components to that. And the first is training mindfulness, and that can come through meditation or yoga. And what we're really looking to do there is to help athletes be more in the present moment and to choose their thoughts better, to choose to focus and concentrate on what's important. And then, over time, as they get better at these mindfulness type things, they can do that for longer and longer periods of time. The next aspect of it is visualization, sometimes called imagery in sports psychology, but that's really visualizing your performance, rehearsing the different things. And that's not just really the performance, but even the process that leads up to it, or like a volleyball perspective, what you're doing in between points. You want to visualize that as well. And so when you're rehearsing this way, you're actually practicing in your head. It's going through those same neural pathways in your head that it would go through as if you were doing it physically. So there's a lot of great research about visualization and how athletes can use that to practice new skills or practice, exactly how they want to play as a good rehearsal. And they feel better and more confident when they go out onto the court, the ice, the field, whatever. The third part of the Mind Gym is using a training journal. And this is something that's, for me, it's a choice to go next level in whatever it is you do, because if you're starting to monitor different parts of your performance, setting goals for yourself on a daily basis, really practicing with intention, the training journal is what can help you learn more and then be more intentional tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And that's something that can really help us get 1% better every single day. We don't need to get 10 or 20% better every day, just 1%. And we let that accumulate. Part 4 of the Mind Gym is where we start to study our sport a little bit more. And that can be as simple as watching professionals play. And then also reading about it or studying the mental game in your sport. We just want to try to raise your sport IQ, your competitive IQ, so that when you're out in a competition, you have a good framework for making decisions. You understand the strategy and tactics of this. And then the last piece of the Mind Gym is similar to like when you go to work out at some sort of gym or have a strength and conditioning program. You do that on a regular basis. We want to make sure that we're making these things habits, that we have specific times in which we are doing Mind Gym activities. And we just let this stuff sort of accumulate over time. And what we see is a lot of mental discipline being added to players. They perform better in practice because they're visualizing. They perform better in competition. They're seeing themselves get better, right? The use of that training journal actually promotes a lot of confidence because you can see progress. And they're just becoming smarter in their sports. So we want to train the mind as if it were a muscle. And the Mind Gym is our place for doing that. So
you have a complete 5-set program that you put into play.
Yeah, and that's actually just for the Mind Gym, right? The program actually has a whole lot more than that in terms of what we get into with teams. With teams, when I first engage with them, there's essentially a 10-session program. With individuals, it's 12, and it's one of those things that we're looking at this as a training program. A lot of times when people hear sports psychology or psychologist, their immediate thing that they go to is like, okay, we're in therapy. There's something wrong with me. And that's simply not true. It's that we are actually trying to train these very important mental and competitive skills. And so we have to look at it in that way, just like, with going to the gym. You can't go once in January and then say, hey, Mr. Trainer, I will see you next year for our next session.
Why not? I think I'd get tone.
Yeah. It'd be great if it worked that way, Alicia, but really the most important thing is that consistency. And so those initial programs are really to help people understand the basics of what it means to be a great competitor and start to put in place a system that they can then be using the rest of their competitive careers and the rest of their lives. Some teams will stop after the 10 or individuals stop after the 12, but many go on and on. The volleyball team that I was using as an example, that's a team that I've been working with for the last 3 years. And they've been through those sessions. And then whenever freshmen come in, we do a refresher for them. So the program, we've got these initial types of programs to get people up to speed and understanding what mental toughness is and competitive skills are. But really, just like, with going to the gym, it really should never stop.
And that actually just brought me right to the next question, which was how long do you work with your clients? And how long does the programs take? Obviously you have a variety.
There's a variety, yeah. And at least once people go through the initial 12 sessions, and let's say, you're an individual, you're an athlete, you want to work on this, Alicia, the 12 sessions would be approximately 3 to 4 months. We'd get together once a week, typically, over Skype. And, we would have conversations. I would show you different things. We would have a place on Google Drive to do some collaboration and we store reference materials there. And even though we have these sessions, you still can, have access to me at any time if you want to text or call, because I want the athlete to actually see this as a coaching relationship, not a lawyer, where I'm charging you for every single minute that we're speaking. I'm invested in you becoming a great competitor. The money is great, but, ultimately my mission is to help athletes become great competitors. I'm willing to do whatever that takes. And so, if you're getting ready for some sort of event on the weekend and feeling a little bit nervous and need a pep talk, hey, let's get on the phone for, 10, 15 minutes and walk through that, or let's text a little bit. So that's kind of how the structure of that program works. And once athletes are done with it, some will continue to meet weekly, some will do every other week or once a month, or maybe just ad hoc, looking for a little checkup or a tune-up based on what they've been experiencing over the last several months.
Okay, so what do you find that maybe the common denominators are on why a team is not performing at its best?
I think there are several common issues or common denominators with athletes. Some are a little bit different based on gender. So, for example, female athletes often really struggle with confidence. And for whatever reason, they don't bring as much confidence to the table as they should. And sometimes we see the opposite with some male athletes, especially of college age. They perhaps are bringing a little bit too much confidence, a little bit too much of, I already know that type of thing. So we have different flavors there. Certainly focus is something that is a very common denominator. Negative self-talk and self-criticism is very, very common. And then I would say the last one would be dealing with nerves and anxiety and feeling nervous under pressure or choking under pressure. And so those are the basic things that we work around.
Well, now all of those make complete sense when it comes to, performing like that. So that totally makes sense. So tell me this, how does your past experience, because I know you were a tennis player, how do you bring that into play when you're helping either a solo athlete or a team?
Yeah, I'd actually like to think of myself as still a tennis player. So I still compete. I'm not dead yet. So,
Okay.
But I think it's very helpful because a lot of these things that these athletes are going through are things I went through. As a young player, I definitely had some negativity issues, definitely had a temper, a lot of broken rackets in my past, a lot of negative self-talk. I went through a phase when I was 16 of getting extremely nervous and choking matches. And so I feel like I can really identify with these athletes. And I tell them that I'm not coming to you as, this perfectly chiseled example of mental toughness. I've lived through a lot of these things. And I really wish I had some training like this when I was younger. And that's a big reason I do this, because for me, it took kind of a moment in my 30s to just sort of wake up and say, man, you blew it. You did not do what you needed to do when you were younger to have the career that you could have had. And that's really what kind of kicked me in the butt and said, you know what, let's make the second half of your career better than the first. And so I don't want these athletes to wake up when they're 35 or 40 years old and regret that they didn't put in all the work that they should have. And so I think my story as a tennis player is extremely valuable in my ability to connect with these athletes.
Definitely. And also you're a person who's speaking from experience and, being a youngster and somebody older saying, look, you don't want to regret this. If you have the chance now, you need to go for it. And so I think that that's really powerful.
And it brings it back to, the John Wooden definition of success. So John Wooden was famous basketball coach for UCLA. His teams won 10 NCAA titles, including 7 in a row. And, his definition of success was that success is peace of mind that is a direct result of self-satisfaction, that you have done everything you could to become the best that you could become. And I think actually the first part of the definition is really the key. It's that peace of mind when you look back and say, I have no regrets. Based on what I knew then, I did everything I could to become the best that I could become. And to me, that's an important definition of success to share with young athletes and people on teams.
Definitely. So how important is mindset when it comes to, how a team may be performing, and how do you help them with that?
I think mindset is huge. And you could even call it different things. You could call it your personal philosophy, call it your principles. But it's really, mindset is about how we view different things like competition, challenges, adversity. And we get to choose how we view those things, right? One could view, say, a pressure situation as an opportunity to fail. Someone else could view that as an opportunity to succeed. And I think the sport that is the easiest one to really see this is basketball. And, who really wants to take the shot at the end of the game when their team is down by a point, with a minute to go? There are some players who want the ball, and there are some players who don't want the ball. And, if anybody who's a basketball fan, you'll think of players like a Michael Jordan, Larry Bird.
Curry.
Yeah, exactly. Steph Curry. These are guys who want the ball, even though there's a risk of failure. They're thinking about success, but they're also thinking, if I fail, I will learn something from that, and I will come back the next day and do it better. Where many people, when we're looking at this as an opportunity to fail, we much more associate that with our identity as good players, and that is that failure is a threat to that identity. So we really have to work on how we view challenges, adversity, what the point of competition is. And so we actually have philosophy sessions where we discuss this. We try to apply these philosophies to different situations that could occur, as simple as making a mistake and how you deal with it, all the way out to, something where we're trying to close out some sort of championship event. And we want to really program how we think of what our response is in those situations with the right mindset, because mindset really drives performance.
So tell me this, what is the top 3 strengths you bring to the table when a team brings you on?
Well, I think we talked about one of them already, which is me being a fellow competitor. And I think being able to kind of share that experience with athletes, it's a great way for us to connect right away. I think also I love learning. I think actually learning and being open-minded is a huge part of being a great competitor. So I try to bring that enthusiasm to our classroom sessions, and then if I'm going to practice, about learning and how that's going to help us improve. And then I think lastly, I'm a very positive and optimistic guy. I'm very good at finding the silver lining in anything, finding the benefit of even the most negative situations that could happen. And I like to think of myself as an irrational optimist, especially when we're competing, because pessimism gets you nothing. So why not be irrationally optimistic while you're out there? The worst that you're going to do is lose. The best you're going to do is maybe come back and have a great performance. So I think those are the things that really differentiate that I think are strengths of mine.
Okay, so if you had one piece of advice for an athlete or a coach that is maybe struggling to perform at their best, what would it be?
Now, this isn't necessarily like going toward your performance, but also might just be more of a life thing, is begin meditating, begin some sort of mindfulness or looking into that piece, just as a way to start to develop some self-awareness about the way your brain works. Because it's probably your brain that's getting in the way of your best performances. your body likely knows how to do what it's supposed to do. It's, whether it's our thoughts and it's our brain that is really acting almost like a barrier, an obstacle toward that. And so if you begin to understand a little bit more about how your brain works, begin to cultivate the ability to be more present over time, that can help you start to get your brain out of the way and let your body do what it already knows how to do. And I think that's, we're seeing a lot of research in the last couple of years showing that mindfulness and meditation are actually outperforming other more traditional sports psychology techniques.
Really?
Yeah, it's surprising on that, but that's what a lot of the more recent research has said. And so I've been trying to combine really both into, a more cognitive-based strategy with a lot of the things that we do, but also with our mind gym piece, using meditation as a way of really developing an athlete or even a coach's brain so that they can, be making better decisions, be more mentally disciplined, et cetera.
Okay, well, I just have one more question. This is probably the most important one. If maybe an athlete, a team owner or a coach wanted to get a hold of you for your services, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I think the best place to start would be my website, which is performanceextra.com. So it's performanceextra.com. So you can find my email there. There's a contact us form. Find my phone number there. Usually people call or text. That's a great way to get in touch with me. I'm very responsive that way. You can also follow me on Twitter, so @performanceextra. And so those are awesome ways to get in touch with me. You can get your questions answered and maybe get us started with a program.
Nice. Well, Brian, I love your approach. I love that you're actually teaching from experience. By the way, how long have you been playing tennis?
Oof, that's a lot of years. 44, Alicia.
Wow.
So I started when I was 6, and I just turned 50 this year. And in fact, I'm writing a special series on my blog called 50 Ideas for Turning 50. So 50 for 50. And that might be something that your listeners might be interested in following. But yeah, it's been a long time.
Definitely. They can find that on your website?
Yes, on my blog. Yep, there's a whole series there called 50 for 50.
Nice. Well, great, Brian. I really, really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Alicia. It was great to be here, and I enjoyed our conversation.
I think that any athlete, team, or coach would, be privileged to have you aboard and to, help them bring their game to the next level.
I hope so, too. I think that can definitely help them.
All right, guys, you just heard from Brian Lomax. His contact information will be here on the show notes. This is your host, Alicia DeBrell from Insight Media. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.